I'm Al McFarlane. Welcome to the conversation with Al McFarlane. Glad to be here and glad to have you along as well. Today is Wednesday, February 8th, 2023. Before I do anything, a shout out to my daughter and publisher of Insight News, Batala Ra McFarlane. Happy birthday, Batala. And just keep on rocking the way you've been rocking. You're doing a great job in every aspect of your life. Well, listen, it's a cool thing to have that shout out first because a lot of today's program deals with children. And we're going to begin with a hot topic that talks about sugar in school meals for the first time being limited by some new rules that are being created. But before that, I want to invite you who are listening and joining us on any of the platforms to support this work, this conversation by subscribing. We're trying to drive everybody that's engaged to our YouTube page. So go to YouTube Insight and click on the conversation and subscribe. Doesn't cost you anything, but it helps us create community. We want to grow numbers. We're at around 300 or so right now. We want to go to 1,000. And if you can help us by becoming one of the 1,000, I thank you in advance. I appreciate you and hope that this is of value to you. I hope you'll share this with your friends, your neighbors, and your networks, because I think that the wonderful thing about this technology is that it allows us to be in community in ways that we couldn't be before. And I think that's a wonderful thing. Well, we start with hot topics, and I have one item today. I mentioned it's that there are some new rules that would limit the sugar in school meals for the first time. This is an article that appeared in Insight News. It's by Associated Press writer Jonelle Alicia, and it ran first on February 3rd. It says that the U.S. Agriculture Department previously has proposed new nutrition standards for school meals, including the first limits on added sugars, with the focus on sweetened foods such as cereals, yogurt, flavored milk, and breakfast pastries. The plan announced by Agriculture Secretary Tom Vilsack also seeks to significantly decrease sodium in the meals served to the nation's school kids by 2029, while making the rules for food made with whole grains more flexible. Finally, the goal is to improve nutrition and align with U.S. dietary guidelines in the program that serves breakfast to more than 15 million children and lunch to nearly 30 million children every day, the commissioner said. He said, quote, "School meals happen to be the meals with the highest nutritional value of any meal that children can get outside the home." And he said the first limits on added sugars would be required in the 2025-2026 school year, starting with high sugar foods such as sweetened cereals, yogurts, and flavored milks. And under the plan, an 8-ounce container of chocolate milk, for example, would contain no more than 10 grams of sugar. Some popular flavored milks now contain twice that amount. The plan also limits sugary grain desserts, such as muffins or donuts, and no more than twice a week at breakfast. Well, that's good news. I think we all have to think about health and being healthy, and it's good to see that our nation is moving towards that in that direction. I want to go now to introduce my guest. It's a friend for a long, long time, a collaborator, a leader, I say a creative genius in our community, Peter Brosius. Peter Brosius is the artistic director at the Children's Theater Company in Minneapolis. And we've been doing wonderful stuff together for years, but now we are here continuing our applause of Peter and team at Children's Theater for a couple of things that we'll talk about in today's program. One is the upcoming new production, the production called Corduroy. It's something that has been there before. It's coming back by popular demand, and it's going to be running at the Children's Theater Company February 14th through April 2nd. We'll talk about that. But we're also going to talk about a couple of important collaborations, and I'll let Peter announce those to you. But reimagining relationships that are created in a way to ensure access, opportunity, elevation of the genius in our multicultural, multi-ethnic communities in the arena of the arts and theater in particular. Peter, good afternoon, my friend. How you doing? Good to see you.
I'm so happy to see you again. It's been too long. And congrats on this program and this conversation you're doing.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Let's start off by giving people Children's Theater Company 101. For those who haven't heard it from me in a long time, I'm going to ask you to introduce both the company, the vision, the work, and the history, the story about CTC.
Well, thank you so much. And as always, it's just great to spend time with you, my friend. Well, Children's Theater Company is the largest and most acclaimed theater for multi-generational audiences, for young people and their families in the United States. You know, we've been here for over 50 years, and it's been a great honor to create, work that educates, challenges, and inspires young people in their communities. We have a strong and active education program. We do residencies and work in schools and preschools and deep partnerships. We create work and we produce work and we present work from around the world. And we see our mandate as creating work. You used a beautiful word, Al, that I just love, which is that uplifts, that helps create curiosity and compassion and build truly global citizens. And to that end, we look at bringing work to the stage that reflects the gorgeous diversity of this community, this nation, this world, and allows people to really see themselves and see others. And so to that end, we commission a lot of work. We do a lot of new work, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But this theater has been making work for this community and then having that work done across the country and around the world. And we've also toured our work. We've taken it to Russia, to Japan, to South Africa and Cape Town, to New York, and across the state of Minnesota and across the nation. So
amazing. And
so we'd like to stay busy. All
the while bringing new talent to the stage and introducing new voices to the public. As you're talking and remembering some of the people that I know got their start at CTC, and you've been producing just greatness as a matter of course, as part of your work over a long period of time. I do want to find out, have you sort of reflect on what you would say are the benchmark or hallmark moments of the organization? I'd love to know about what you've done in terms of international productions, things that you've brought here that are international, and things that you've taken up, like you mentioned, South Africa and Russia. Tell me stories about those.
Well, we created a piece with the amazing actress Sonja Parks, who was very important here in the Twin Cities. And together we created a piece called Seed Folks, which was based on a book about a broken down lot in a city, and how one community member after another gets involved in this lot, and slowly that comes together, builds a community garden, and transforms this community. There are about 18 to 20 characters in it, and it was all played by the amazing Sonja Parks. And we took this piece and we played it here. We toured Minnesota. We took it to New York, played it 42nd and Broadway. And then we were very honored to be the only American company invited to attend a major festival in Cape Town. And we took that piece to Cape Town, and it was absolutely incredible. We had our opening day. There was an incredible group of young artists from one of the townships who came, and Sonja sort of created a community where they sat in a circle and shared stories about their lives and their dreams and what it meant to be an artist, what it meant to be an artist in America, what it meant to be an artist in Cape Town. And I think they were deeply inspired by this piece because it was about building community, but it was also in the hands of a remarkably talented artist who showed what it meant without changing a costume or a prop or a wig or anything, to go from being, an old grandmother from the South to an East Indian businessman to a Puerto Rican child to a male bodybuilder. I mean, she just did it all with voice and body.
Absolute genius, right?
Yeah,
and delivering.
Yeah, she's a force of nature. And so, that was a really proud moment for this theater, not only to create a piece that I thought really helped talk about community and how we can build community and how we can come together from very different strands, but also showcased the possibility of what an actor can do. Because Sonja just took it out. It was crazy.
Well, speaking of Africa, you and I worked together on the Lost Boys of Sudan. You
That's
produced
right. That's
that
right.
wonderful and timely production at CTC, and we were fortunate and pleased to be part of carrying the discussion
Yeah.
about the arrival of Sudanese who were refugees, and the Lost Boys centered really here in Minnesota, and I think maybe some in South Dakota. But this
Yep.
was a center point for that community's emergence in this country, and you were able to bring in the story in the form of art, in the form of a play that explained their experience, the dangers they experienced traveling through war zones and seeking refuge from a war. Talk about that. That was a wonderful thing, and thank you for having done it. I still am very proud of the relationship we had on that.
That was really fun. That was really important. I mean, you know, I was reading these articles about the arrival in the Midwest of these Sudanese refugees, and I was just struck by the fact of, you know, what a radical change it meant to come from, you know, the struggles in South Sudan to Fargo to you know, all over Minnesota, and so we began a process of, you know, speaking to the young men from the Sudan and hearing their stories. We took a whole busload of actors up to Fargo Moorhead and spent hours and hours and hours sharing stories of our lives and their lives and learning from them. And then our playwright, you know, used that information to create a piece that was in 2 acts. The first act took place in the Sudan and told the stories of the kinds of obstacles they were facing. And then the second act took place in the dislocation, the frigid weather of the upper Midwest, and how they found their way and what it meant to suddenly have, you know, food in cans and, you know, and temperatures that were beyond comprehension. And one of my favorite, you know, we did a lot of wonderful community partnerships in that, but one of the things that we did that I really loved is we did an art show, and that art show was Sudanese artists from the diaspora from all over, and then we had teenage artists see that work and then respond to it, and then we had an opening where both the Sudanese artists and the Minnesota contemporary teenagers all came together as artists to talk about what they saw, what they learned, what their experience was, and you know, it was very powerful, you know, and I remember, you know, several gentlemen came to see the show. Then they came back with their families in full, you know, Sudanese robes and so proud that their story was being told on our stage. Right. It was very moving that we captured some real aspect of their experience, because, you know, that's part of our lives in the Midwest. It's part of, you know, the story of the United States is that we're a country that has historically welcomed refugees. It's part of what's made us great. And I know there's all kinds of challenges about that now, but I think what this piece tried to do was say, you know, this is who we are. This can be the generosity of spirit that's part of America. And we all benefit from this.
And if I remember correctly, what we did in partnership with you was host a video conference with South Sudan. In Juba, and we talked to people that were underground who were responding to the effort to create peace and tranquility, civility in South Sudan in the middle of a war, and a war which resulted in all these young people fleeing South Sudan, looking for to save their lives, right?
Right.
And so we had a chance to focus on all of that. I remember, Peter, that this is how kind of the spirit works, I guess, as when you guys approached me about what's going on and is this a story that we should do. I think around the same time, maybe weeks later, I came back to my office over on Bryan Avenue at the Marcus Garvey House, North Minneapolis, where we operate Insight News from. And there were these guys sitting on it was summertime, 3 guys sitting on my lawn. And they just kind of laid back, you know, leisurely, maybe waiting, taking a break. I'm not sure what they're doing. But I hadn't seen them before. When I pulled up in my car, you know, my attitude, these are brothers, you know, in our neighborhood. How you doing? My name is Al. And one of the guys said his name was Tut. And so I said, well, you guys want some water? Come on in. And I invited the three guys into our office, had water, hospitality. I said, "Who are you?" They said, "We're from South Sudan." And they were, I think, Nuer. Nuer was the tribe they belonged to.
That's right.
And they had the traditional markings, either lines or pock, on their faces and foreheads. And we asked about that. And I remember, Peter, for the first time I ever heard this in my life. So I said, "Well, tell me," because I was totally unaware of their story and of their plight. And tell me about your country, where you're from. You know, are you Muslim? Are you Christian? What are you? So the guy said, "We're pagan." I said, "What?" I've never heard that before.
Right.
I've never, ever heard that. But my association with the word pagan is a negative one out of our culture. And they were saying, no, this is a different system for looking at creation, nature, the all of existence, right? And it's a viewpoint of creation, a cosmology that allows them to order everything. So it was fascinating. And that happened. Then we got with you, and it just made all the sense in the world that we do this connection and try to have a video conference supporting the show, but explaining the story of the immigrants from Sudan, the lost boys of Sudan. It was wonderful. So thank you again for that.
Well, you know, one of the things about that video conference that you were talking about that I remember so well, we had a whole group of students from North High, you know, and there was some official dissembling and not full truths being said by some of the elected officials, you know, from Sudan. And I was so excited by these students from North High who asked these questions, probing that elected officials, catching them in their falsehoods and holding them to the fire. I was like, this is an incredible moment where these students see that they can have a voice to speak truth to power. And boy, did they do it. It was so cool. I was just like, because, you know, you think this, because the person was very smooth and very elegant and very slick.
Diplomat,
they did not buy it. They saw right through it. It was one of these great moments, like, the future's in good hands. These young people are going to take care of us. You know? Well,
so we did the same thing on, I think, the Watsons Go to Birmingham. What the name of it? Talk about that. That was fun for me. Great show where you had a powerful story being staged and presented that was historic and historically historic, right? I mean, significantly historic in terms of the whole America. And the development of the civil rights movement and the movement for justice.
That's right.
And the resistance to that.
That's right.
And we did a video conference with people in Birmingham, Alabama, people that were associated with the bombing of the church where these children were killed. And that was powerful. What do you remember about that?
Well, what I remember about that show is it's a very smart show in that it starts as this, you know, kind of very funny family story about the two brothers that don't get along. And, you know, the one brother's kind of a knucklehead. And so the family's going to take him down south to get him all straightened out with grandma, you know, and then the road trip is, you know, as we know from, so many stories in the history of how perilous it could be for Black families to be traveling on the road through the South and, you know, getting stopped and the dangers of that. And then when they arrive also, they arrive at the time of the terrifying bombing of the 4 girls in the church in Birmingham. And so watching a family sort of go through that and watching a young man go from, being, dealing with some issues of irresponsibility to finding their voice and their sort of character truth. It's a powerful piece. It's a powerful piece about, how history can impact us, how history can change us, how we can learn from that history. And, all the events we did around it, hearing from the heroes of the civil rights movement, letting those stories become alive and fresh, because those are stories of such amazing courage of what it stood up to stand up to that kind of violence, that kind of pressure. You need to be reminded this didn't come easy. Change is hard and change can sometimes be dangerous, but, we need to move forward. And this is a piece about how we can move forward. And so it was a beautiful piece to do and a beautiful piece to share with audiences. And, our partnership, amplifying that and hearing from the heroes of the civil rights movement, it's just something that we need to remember all the time.
I'm Al McFarlane. This is The Conversation with Al McFarlane. My guest is Peter Brosius. He's artistic director of Children's Theater Company. And we're kind of traveling down memory lane. We're old friends and collaborators, and I'm simply enjoying revisiting things we've done together and learning more about things you've done, great work you've done, you and your team at CTC have done forever. I have to tell you, too, one of my other favorite CTC stories, because your venue is so beautiful. The theater is so rich, so warm, and elegant and inviting. And I remember going to see my favorite musician in the world at the time playing a concert there. It was Sun Ra. And and I think I came in a little bit late and had a seat in the balcony. But the song that I entered on was Halloween in Harlem. And it was just a delightful piece of music and jazz, and the feeling for the whole evening was just amazing, amazing. So not only do you present your own productions, there are places of venue where other things happen as well, and I thank you for that as well.
That's our
So
pleasure.
let's talk about what's coming up now. You said you're going into production in a few hours, right? Tell me what's going on today.
We are in rehearsal on a fantastic show called Corduroy, which is an adaptation of a book that Don Freeman wrote in 1968. And it was very important for a couple of reasons. One is it came out of his own life. He lost his mother at the age of 8 and, was moved in with a guardian, and his father supported that. But there was a longing for home, a longing for family. And so he created this character of this little bear who is missing a button. And when a young girl, Lisa, comes in to want this bear, her mother says no, because he's broken, he's missing a button. And then the bear goes on a search for that button throughout this department store. And the little girl, in our version, goes on a campaign to convince her mother to get the bear. When this piece came out, and it came out of Don Freeman's heart about what it means to find home, what it means to find friends, what it means to find love. And so he created, a Black family, Lisa and her mom, and then in our version, this little bear and the night security guard at this department store. It is a piece both about that longing for home, about that longing for friendship, about that connection, and it is a piece of utter hilarity and comic disasters as the bear rampages through the store trying to find anything that looks like a button that he can put on, and the nighttime security guard gets into one mess after another. At the same time, Lisa, trying to do the right thing and get her mom to give her an advance on her allowance, just like the bear, causes all kinds of chaos at home, makes one mess after another, drives her poor mom crazy, and until they're joined at the end. And so it is a piece of unbelievable physical comedy, laugh out loud funny, and then really tender longing for that friendship, for that sense of connection, that sense of, being loved, being cared for. And so it's got physical comedy like you've never seen. It is so much fun. And we did it on our Cargill stage. Now we're putting it on the United Health Group stage, the big stage. And because it was such a big success, we cannot wait to share it. So we start tonight with technical rehearsals where we add the sets and the costumes and the lights. And then a week from yesterday, we have our first preview audience. So we can't wait.
Amazing.
The cast is fantastic. Oh my God, they're so good.
We'll have you talk about them in a minute. I think we have a clip we're going to play. And what are we going to see in this clip?
This is a clip from our previous production, and the play's divided between sort of the domestic scenes with Lisa and her mom at the house, where unfortunately this poor sweet little girl just keeps making one accident after another and mess it up, and then the scenes in the department store where Corduroy makes one mess after another, and the night watch person tries to clean it up. So I'm not sure which clip we'll see, but we'll take a look.
Let's check it out.
Time. And that must be why he's sad. He's just waiting for someone to come along and take him home. What he needs is a friend.
What he needs is some mending.
Hard, but Corduroy would make a fine friend.
Corduroy.
And that's what I named the bear, for his green overalls.
His damaged green overalls.
It's just the lost button.
Boy, that's funny. That looks like real work to me too.
Oh yeah,
Man.
yeah. I mean, Dean Holt plays Corduroy the bear, and he is, a acrobat, a physical comedian, the likes of Charlie Chaplin and Buster Keaton. I mean, he can do anything. And I'm not going to tell you all the stuff he does, but he pulls out all the stops in this one. You're going to see things you just can't believe. It's so fun.
Let's talk about what's happening with this collaboration that I mentioned. We've got a story. I think it's in Insight News. That's or right. Maybe it's a press release, but it says that there's a project called Generation Now Partnership. It's a group of 5 theaters, and they've announced their first round of co-commissions. And the piece that I have in front of me is by the American Theater Editors. Datelines are Minneapolis, St. Paul, Los Angeles, and New York City. And it goes, the 5 theaters that comprise the Generation Now Partnership, and they are Latino Theater Company, Ma-Yi Theater Company, Native Voices at the Autry, Penumbra Theater, and Children's Theater Company have awarded their first round of commissions to 4 projects. These include One Small Alice by Ifa Bayeza, Drawing Lessons by Michi Barali, Comanche Girl on the Moon by Dustin Tamakera, I think, and a work exploring the world of folklorical dance by the Latino Theater Company. Tell me about the project. That sounds exciting that this collaboration is taking place. How innovative is that? Is there a history of this already? And where do you go with this?
Yeah, I don't think there's ever been anything quite like it, with theaters that are leaders, culturally specific theaters that are the leaders in their field, coming together across cultures and across boundaries and across the nation with the leader in multi-generational work to create multi-generational work by BIPOC artists. This is responding to a couple real needs. How do we create more work by both emerging and established BIPOC artists for audiences of multi-generational work? How do we increase the canon of that work so this work is being done not only by us and by our partners, but by theaters across this country, so that young people see themselves on their stages, so young people see other cultures on that stages, so young people learn from other cultures. And so it's also the hope of expanding the work of our partner theaters to do more multi-generational work. These are all adult theaters that generally do, adult theater. And so the idea of this is very important to us, because what we want to do is, create a body of work that can have a major life. And so with each of these theaters, these are remarkable leaders. I mean, Sarah Bellamy in our own community, Jose Luis Valenzuela in LA, Delena Studi and Elisa Blanford at Native Voices, and Ralph Peña at Ma-Yi. These are absolute leaders in the field. They're visionaries, they're forces, they're revolutionaries. They are just making an incredible impact. And so, I've had the great good fortune of knowing most of them for years. And so I said, would you like to come in? And we're going to apply for a major grant to create this work, to support you and to support creating multi-generational work. And we went to the Mellon Foundation And as a cohort, we wrote this grant together. We met many, many times to develop the proposal. And then we received $1.5 million to make this work, to commission these 16 projects. And so the exciting part is the commissions are out. We've already had workshops on one of them. We're having a second workshop coming up in April, and another workshop coming up in June, and another workshop coming, so the plays are happening, and we're already at work getting ready for the second round. And again, the hope is expand the work for multi-generational audiences, let audiences meet playwrights and artists that they may not have met, and give artists the opportunities to make work for this really, really, really important audience. And so far, I just feel like it is such an honor and a blessing to be in these meetings with these leaders who are doing so much for their communities, who are doing so much for artists, who see themselves as, holders of culture, holders of community stories, and just do remarkable work bringing artists and communities together. There's so much to learn from these, these leaders. And also the other part that's incredible is everybody works differently. Everybody works really, really differently. So how to work together, how to form, really co-learning, mutually beneficial partnerships. And also we're really different scales, And so, like Native Voices, for example, at the Autry does one show a year. We're asking them to double their productions. And that's huge, know? And, and Mai does a whole lot of things, Penumbra has their own all season. And so it's everybody works differently. Everybody works with playwrights differently. And so part of the joy of this is learning how they work, how they support artists, what we can learn together, and then how we can all work together. What's going to happen in New York is all of these leaders, we're doing a convening in April, all these leaders will come together to hear a number of presentations, and then we'll all have conversations about it. So the artists get the opportunity to hear from these remarkable leaders insights into their pieces. So I'm really excited about this.
It sounds exciting. It sounds exciting, and I always ask people, art for what end? I'll ask you that question as a person steeped in the work for a lifetime. Art to what end? And in particular, what does that mean for the day that we're in now, when the nation and the world are involved in what some call a reckoning, an examination of hierarchy, of patriarchy, of relationships, of power, and a request or a demand for a shift in the dynamic of being, a shift towards respecting authentic realities that everybody brings from wherever she is or he is, right? And a shift that allows us to hear and to listen. And how does that show up in the producing? What you were describing to me sounds like, Peter, an intentionality of honoring you called it the different ways of doing each of these organizations bring, and believing that there's a way for all of them to fit together and to be co-authors of a future that elevates and supports all of them and all of the audiences, and therefore everybody. What do you think?
Well, you said it so beautifully. I think we all see, all of us in this cohort see that theater has a role to play in starting conversation, in bringing communities together, to have the difficult conversations, to look at each other, to find commonality. Because what happens in a theater piece is we're all in space together, listening together. And they've done this research that when people are watching a play, their heartbeats start to synchronize, quite literally. So it's not only emotional and intellectual, it's also physiological, that you're coming together and you create a community. So when we create work that asks us to see each other and asks us to look at difficult questions, like we did last year with Something Happened in Our Town, which was a play that the wonderful Cheryl West wrote for us, which looks at, two kids, two neighbors who are one black, one white, and what happens between their families and between them when there's a police shooting of an unarmed black man in their community. And, just like that, we hope these pieces spur conversation, spur dialogue, keep people in the theater long after the show's over, to really offer their voices up and to share. And so, and, you know, like Latino Theater Company really makes work specifically, you know, for the Latinx audience. And so how do we, you know, and so they're making work for a very specific audience. And so the idea of bringing that work here and sharing it with a larger audience, or the piece that we're working on with Mai is a piece that both looks at a biracial family. It looks at what it means to have a condition known as selective mutism, where the child doesn't really speak, and what it means to have that child who doesn't really speak, but is a visual artist and graphic novelist of budding energy, find their voice. And so, you know, these are stories that are unusual, that are real, that talk about the issues in everyone's life, and are done with such humor and spirit, etc. And so, I mean, I think the goal is, you know, we know we're in dangerous times. We know these are really difficult times, and that the arts must create space for people to see each other. It must create space for curiosity, must create space for learning, must create space for conversation. And so, just the way we're trying to learn to talk to each other in our cohort, you know, I mean, the history of collaboration between large, historically white organizations and theaters of color is a bad history in America. It is not a good history. And so we're trying to learn from the mistakes and create, you know, a very functional partnership. And it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of intentionality because, you know.
Let me say thanks to Jill Griffiths, who's tuning in the program. She put a note, we'll put it on the screen here. She said, quote, "We held a circle of belonging at CTC for my daughter, Sky Lee, on May Day 2001, after she joined our family from China. It remains a favorite memory.
That's great.
Thank you, Children's Theater."
Oh,
well,
that's
thank
beautiful.
you, Jill, for sharing that.
Thank you so much. That's great to hear.
Yeah, and that's the testimony is what it's all about.
Yeah.
Is people that testify and affirm that it's personal and it's real in their lives. Well, you touched on something that I often bring up, and that is, how do we talk about what was and what is and what will be? And so my perception of what was in the world of quote unquote professional theater, professional euphemism for white theater, right? Or American theater, American euphemism for white theater, or in legitimate theater, legitimate euphemism for white, right? All of that cultural load, cultural chauvinism, cultural imperialism, all of it demanding that everybody genuflect at the altar of white supremacy. And I think that the art of the day reflected that, because the art of the day in history glorified, rewrote the actual story of the annihilation of millions of inhabitants of this continent and the enslavement of millions of Africans who came here throughout North and South America and Central America in the transatlantic slave trade. The art reflected and made all of that digestible, understandable, and allowed white culture to not hold itself accountable for the misery that it visited on the planet and on human beings. And so that's kind of where we were, as I see it, Peter. And where we are is the place you described. It's a shift in everything. And the theater, and artists lead the shift, I believe. They are the bellwether. They are the canaries, right? And they both protest and demonstrate with their audacity what could be, what ought to be, what can be if we simply imagined and discovered our best selves. And so then the question is, where does it go? So let me stop there. I'm just throwing out how I look at it. How do you look at it?
Well, Al, I don't think anyone's ever said it better than you just said it. Okay. Thank you for that. And thank you for that, both honoring of artists and the challenge to artists that you just did. I think we're at a time of an extraordinary reckoning. And I think there's a sense of opportunity, a sense of responsibility and a sense of urgency about making sure that these spaces, like the Children's Theater Company and like all the major arts organizations, create are spaces where the whole community feels welcome, where all voices are heard. I mean, to that end, at CTC, for example, we're committed to 50% of the actors on our stages are BIPOC. We're working to have 50% of the work on our stages reflect BIPOC perspectives. And so as we look at what we have under commission, we're hugely focused on giving opportunities to artists of color to tell the stories that need to be told, to tell the stories that have been untold, and to bring their authentic selves to this work. And this Generation Now project, I think, is a kind of model, hopefully, that we can pull off, that because right now we're in the commission stage, then we have to go into the production stage to move from hierarchy to real co-learning, real intersectional partnerships where we really learn from each other. We really are honest and give space and take advantage of the wisdom of our colleagues and the wisdom of their experience and the wisdom of the artists that they champion. And so I guess I'm pretty optimistic actually about the future of the theater in terms of the hunger to create a space for all voices. And also, it's simply a matter, we know where this country's headed in terms of demographic transformation.
Yeah.
And for the theater to be relevant, it cannot stay where it was. It must embrace the future. And we know that particularly at children's theater because we can see who is in the schools. We can see who's there, and we can see, what the population is going to be and how to support, enhance, encourage, and uplift this audience with stories that are going to challenge them and excite them and make them curious and empathetic. So, I'm optimistic about this time. I'm optimistic that this cohort of people are generous enough to make time for this work and incorporate it into their mission, and the seriousness with which they bring the work they're doing. I look across the field, and this isn't an easy time for the theater. Funding's difficult. The pandemic was brutal. Coming back is tough.
Yep.
And yet there's also a sense that, we need to find new models. We need to find new ways of working and new ways of collaborating, new ways of learning from each other. So I'm always an optimist. So I'm particularly an optimist, even coming out of one of the toughest times in the history of the American theater.
I did a program recently. The theme of it was decolonizing our minds.
Uh-huh.
And so I throw that out just for you and I to chew on it for a minute. The notion of decolonization, what I described earlier was in part could be summed up as part of the process of colonizing the world, the colonial system of exploitation, domination, and extraction of both life, of genius, of materials. I say often, Peter, when I'm talking about Africa in particular, one of my friends who have been to Africa say, I hear white people say, oh, love Africa, I say, yeah, you do. You love Africa. You just don't like the Africans. And is that a fair statement? Well, you probably loved North America. And we know what you did to the North Americans. Right? So it's not far-fetched for me to be critical and skeptical. There's a history that you may try to hide, but you cannot hide. Right? And so where am I going with that? So part of the challenge, and you've addressed this in part, is creating a space where everybody can undo the colonial straitjacket. That straitjacket, again, focused on the singularity of power and truth, with a sense that it was both deserved but also undefeatable. Right? And so that you have a choice of either being yourself or surrendering your sense of self to fit in where you could
Right.
in the white power dynamic. That I think is changing. And I think that discussions like you are having and arrangements like you are part of are uh, signify a shift and a willingness to the thought comes to me mind right now about the beauty of jazz, of improvisation, and understanding that everybody brings their own story and their own training and their own skill and their vision. But when you bring them together in a way that by design uh, allows each and every element to flourish and exist in its own right, it's a marvelous thing. It's uncharted territory,
right.
and that precisely is the point. That's where you want to go. And I think we can move that in that direction. What do you,
I agree. And I'm going to tell you a little story. So when we were writing the grant, you know, these are not only colleagues that I respect, but they're friends. I love these people. You know, I just feel very honored to be working with them. And so we did a draft of this thing and of this grant proposal. And one of the colleagues wrote back and said, "Thank you, but these sections come from a colonial mentality in it." And you know, our team here looked at it and we went, it was just so revelatory, humbling, infuriating that we did that, you know, and we thanked them. We went back through this grant proposal and we saw that we'd sort of centered our lens, our experience, rather than a cohort lens on certain aspects of it. Not the whole thing, but certain paragraphs, but it was there. And because we'd created a space where, you know, it was built on, you know, trust and real relationship, you know, our colleagues said, fix this, you know, and we fixed it. And it was one of these great moments where we went, God, even with the best of intentions, our lenses are so fierce, you know, even with the best of intentions, you know, this work is so deep and so hard and so ongoing. And you know, we fixed it. And the response was good. You know, that's how it should have been. Not like hooray for you. It's like, yeah, that's how it should be.
We're getting towards getting it right.
We're getting towards getting it right. And it was I mean, our team was just chagrined and you know, and it was a great lesson. And so now we know how to begin as we're every document we do, we're looking at it through a cohort lens rather than a CTC lens, you know, and it's terrific. It was just, it took some work. It took some work and we made a mistake and we fixed that mistake, you know?
Yeah. Well, you guys are also leaders in another project. I think it's still going on. You told me before the show, it was called Tickle Cough. That stands for you can give me the whole name for it,
Sure.
but all the large theater organizations in Twin Cities. I think it was an assembly over a couple of years that I knew of anyway, where people like Children's Theater, Ordway, O'Shaughnessy, Orchestra Hall, Minnesota Orchestra, the Walker, the Guthrie, MIA, and there might have been 4 or 5 more. You know, organizations that probably had multi-million-dollar budgets. That was kind of the cutoff. And the question was raised: what is our responsibility to see art as in ways that are different from how we saw it in the past? And how we saw it in the past, again, from my side, was kind of myopic and self-serving and Eurocentric. And so I think that the entire community is looking at the reality that everybody can see the whole world. The technology affords us the opportunity to travel, the movement, right? And so things are not so narrow as they might have been, and information about the expansiveness of existence is readily available for everybody, everywhere. And that means a different dialogue. And so talk about that organization. I know that they had several great meetings. I was involved in a couple of them.
Yeah.
Where is it now?
Well, it's a great question. So it stands for Twin Cities Large Cultural Organizations Forum. And the idea was to create a space where the large cultural organizations could share best practices, combine resources, and move their organizations forward on questions of justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And so, I mean, the good news is that for years now, that group has been meeting monthly. That group is self-taxing to fund things like training our staffs in anti-bias work, training our boards, you know, in looking at bias, and bringing in speakers to talk about demographic shifts, bringing in trainers to work with the leaders of these organizations in terms of how to effectively move those organizations increasingly forward into a more representative, more equitable platform. And we just had a meeting about the future of it. And the sense is that work needs to continue. We need to keep funding it ourselves, that this is the work that these organizations need to do. And you know, and there's been some terrific progress, both in terms of staff composition, board composition, programming composition, audience composition, and that's sort of some of the metrics by which we are challenging and measuring ourselves and our progress. How are we helping to transform these organizations so they can be more representative, more inclusive, more welcoming, and so that work continues. It's been going on for years.
Peter, let me go personal with you and ask you to share a bit about your own personal story. I ask my guests a lot of times, who's your mama, who's your daddy, okay, who's your grandpa, your grandma? And the idea is, whose shoulders do you stand on in your private, personal, introspective moments? What in your own bloodline causes you to be both grateful and to look at your life as mission, not just, but mission, and that mission is traceable. What do you think?
I was, my dad died. My dad was in the Air Force. He died when I was 2. He died. He was a pilot who was training on a training run, and the plane went down. So I was 2. I never got to know him. And so I grew up in a time where, you know, my mom was a single mom. She remarried a number of times. She was a big believer in the possibility of men and a big believer and an optimist. And so, but I got to see her in a time where it wasn't easy to be a single woman, a single mom. It wasn't easy to raise kids. I mean, everything from getting a car loan to getting your car fixed to working with the bank, the sexism was nuts. And you watched people treat her differently. And so you saw the fight she had to do, you saw what it took to fight. And so, and you saw, in a way, the injustices around that she was dealt with as a hardworking single mom. Mm-hmm. She also loved the theater. She was an amateur actress. She worked in the community theater. And so she got the whole family involved. So, I mean, from the earliest stages of my life, we were always rushing off to some community theater or high school production or college production or civic light opera production or something. And so we were always in shows. We were just always in shows. And so I'm really grateful. You know, it's interesting, you know, as much as, you know, not having grown up with a dad, you know, and then becoming a father myself, it's not a small thing, that absence. It's not a small thing, that invention of that role. And I grew up at a time where it sounds bizarre, but like, I mean, later my mom divorced. We were the only divorced family in my school, which is crazy now to think about. Crazy. I feel like I'm 500 years old, but you know, it's like that's wild. But I remember, like, you know, I'm the only one at the Little League game where it's just my mom. You know, it's like, and so obviously that's changed a lot now, but it's given me a sense of compassion for all those kids who grow up without, you know, a mother and a father and all that. So I feel, you know, my grandmother came out and she was a spirited, tough woman from Pennsylvania. My family were all from the coal country up in Pennsylvania, you know, building a machine shop and sales and all kinds of crazy stuff. And, you know, I've gotten to know them. But the big influence in my life was my mom. You know, she was a big, big influence, always welcoming, making our house a welcoming place for people, always encouraging us to, you know, be creative and risk, you know. I mean, crazy story, you know, she took us all to Mexico as a single mom, and we're driving around Mexico. And at a certain point, I think I was 15. I said, I think I want to go off on my own. I think I want to go to here and here and here. And it sounds like neglect now, but she said, okay, meet us back in Mexico City at
Go
such
ahead.
and such a date. And she said, go ahead. And so I took off, and
Unbelievable.
and it's like, now you think, is that like neglect? But it was just like, fine,
Yeah.
At 17, I said, I'm gonna, before I graduated from high school, I said, me and a couple friends, we're gonna hitchhike across Canada. She said, okay. So like things now that you think about, like, are you crazy? There's no, also, I'm old enough. There's no cell phones back then,
Yeah.
You're standing in with some quarters at a payphone. If luckier, you're sending little aerograms back in the day. And so, that trip was instrumental in forming who I am, because you survived and you made money picking cherries and peaches and, hammering cement off bricks in a broken down church in British Columbia to make some money to travel across and hopping freight trains and look at the Northern Lights. And I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful. I mean, that trip was, huge. I got to arrive in New York after we made the whole trip across Canada when the, Neil Armstrong and those guys were having their ticker tape parade. So I got to be there with like mountains of ticker tape, and the whole world is cheering these guys.
But it was for you though, right?
Well, we knew it wasn't for us, but we knew it was really fun. It was, and so I guess I've been lucky that, that sense of trust, that sense of go for it, that sense of you'll make it, you'll be fine, because you'll land on your feet. You'll land on your feet, and you'll learn. You'll make some bad decisions, and then you'll learn from it. Yeah. So,
Peter,
those are some of the shoulders.
We got about a minute.
Okay.
Invite people to the production again.
Okay. Well, I just hope everyone can come see Corduroy. I guarantee it's going to tickle your funny bone and touch you. I'm sitting in rehearsal. It is absolutely hilarious. And we'll be starting performances next Tuesday and running for a good long time. So contact the Children's Theater Company at our website and get tickets, because you're in for a terrific time.
Peter, it was such a good time with you today. I really appreciate this, man. This is just a wonderful, wonderful conversation. And I'll be checking you out later on too. Okay, take care.
All right, my friend. Good to see you. Bye-bye now. Thanks so much.
I'm Al McFarlane. This is The Conversation. We'll be here again tomorrow. Great program tomorrow. Check in. We'll see you. Take care. Bye-bye.